Alright guys, welcome to another podcast. So today we're going to be talking about the World Schools Festival 2019. So the exciting news is that the tickets have gone on sale and the fixtures have been announced. I think they were announced yesterday only. And we are roughly a month away from the first match. Now the first festival was a massive success. Even though a lot of the matches were a bit lopsided, overall for an inaugural festival, I think it was absolutely fantastic. And one of the unfortunate things about this year is that there were some issues, different stories going around and all the rest of it, that there were some issues between the organisers and Paul Boys. You know, there's many sides to the story, so I don't want to report on anything because I don't have all the facts at my disposal. But what we do know is that the festival has been moved from Paul to Stellenbosch and will be hosted by Paul Rus, and Paul Boys are not participating in the festival. So those of you that were following last year know the format. It's a Ryder Cup style tournament and 2 points are awarded to the winning team, and the two sort of teams overall are the South African teams and the rest of the world contingent. So let's just take a look at the day one fixtures. So basically I'm just going to offer some predictions over here. So day one, we got Glenwood against John McGlashan from New Zealand. Now what my contacts are telling me, they're not a very strong school. Glenwood are pretty strong, but they're not going to be anywhere near strong as last year. But I still think they'll probably end up getting a victory over John McGlashan. The South African Invitation 15, look, the squad hasn't been announced, but the Zambezi Steelers, I believe they're called, from Zimbabwe. I don't think that's going to be a very strong team. Zimbabwe normally send their players, the international players, you know, their national team, down to Craven Week every year, and they don't really perform that well. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the South African Invitation are going to win that. And then in terms of the Sax versus the World Schools 15, I don't have much detail on the World Schools 15, but I assume that it's going to be a pretty strong team. So I think what they'll probably do is edge Sax out, and I think Sax are one of the weaker teams at this tournament, just to bring more balance to the tournament overall. So I think Sax are going to lose that one. And then Monument are going to be playing Hartbury. Monument, very strong, very physical team, but Hartbury is essentially a rugby academy, guys. I mean, it's not really a school, so to speak. It's more of an academy for rugby players. And I think, you know, based on their performance last year, look, Gray completely blew them away. But, you know, they had a good victory over Uffies, and Uffies weren't, I mean, they didn't have a great season last year, but there certainly weren't any pushovers. But I think if there's any sort of European school that can take it to a South African Afrikaans school, physically, I think Hartbury are probably one of those teams. So I think they'll probably edge out Monument. I think it'll be a very close game, but I think Hartbury will take it. And then the Africa Pacific Dragons are playing Paul Jim. Paul Jim are going to be, they're going to, look, every year they're strong. This year, is not going to be one of their stronger years, I don't think. They've got an extremely strong grade 11 year. Next year, I think they're probably going to be number one in South Africa. And that's a bold prediction to make already, but they were unbeaten last year. I mean, the matches weren't even close. So they've got a very, very strong grade 11 year this year, but their grade 12 year leaves a little bit to be desired. The Africa Pacific Dragons are going to apparently have some players from Culston, from Hamilton Boys, from some of the very strong New Zealand rugby schools. So I'm going to make a bit of a controversial one over here. I'm going to make it a draw. And I purely think that because, you know, the Africa Pacific Dragons haven't had a lot of time to play together. Poljum, certainly not one of their stronger years. So I think this could be I think there's a big possibility that this could be a draw. So the totals on the first day of the festival, I reckon, would be 5-5. And I think already you've sort of seen the picture here. It's going to be a hell of a lot more competitive than it was last year. Then in terms of day two, Uffies will be playing the Italian All-Stars. I think Uffies will win that very easily. Boland Landbou playing Napier Boys. Napier Boys are pretty strong last year. Now, I know Boland Landbou thrashed them last year, but that Boland Landbou team, if you caught them on the wrong day, it doesn't matter what school you were from, they would have given you a tough run for your money. But from what I understand, a lot of these New Zealand schools plus Hartbury from England, as far as I know, what they're doing is they're actually going to Dubai first. As far as I know, I could be wrong, just to acclimatize. So they're going to be a lot more physically and mentally prepared for this tournament. I think last year was sort of a shock to the system. Now, if you look at the Boland Landbou Napier boys game last year, it was extremely tight, but the heat and the exhaustion just got too much for the guys. And I mean, Darren Hendricks was on fire that day and just completely dismantled Napier boys. So I think Boland Landbou are probably going to lose to Napier boys, but I think it'll be very, very close. Then Hilton against USA Schools. Now, this is the American national team coming down, and Hilton aren't going to be as strong as they were last year, and I just don't see them beating a national team. I know it's America, and America's not that great at rugby and all the rest of it, but, you know, you're talking about finding, you know, the top 15 of a relatively small boys' school against the top 15 of a nation. I don't really think Hilton stands much of a chance over there. So I'm going to go with USA against Hilton. Then the next match is going to be Grey against Christchurch boys. I think Grey will take that. Grey's got some great players from last year coming back. As far as I know, I think the hooker, I think both locks, if I'm not mistaken. Ian Small-Smith is back. I think one of the wings is back. Plus, they got a relatively strong grade 11 support year. These guys, when they were under 16, they were number one in the country. Lost one match to Menlo Park. That was quite a big upset. So I think next year's grade team is going to be of similar quality to this year's. Christchurch boys, from what my people in New Zealand are telling me, are going to be relatively strong this year. And look, don't expect another drubbing like there was last year. Just don't expect a 66-28 type score. I mean, these guys are coming in prepared. They know what to expect. So we can expect a far tighter game, but I just think Grey's going to have too much for Christchurch boys. Porus against Southland. Again, from what I'm being told from my people in New Zealand, Southland aren't that great this year. Porus have got another great year this year. Those forwards are going to be absolutely terrifying to the guys from Southland. I mean, that Porus front row is going to do some real damage. I mean, last year's front row was fantastic. Robbie Rogers is still remaining here, and I mean, that guy's a beast of a prop as well. So I think what you'll see in the Porus Southland boys games is that the Porus boys will probably keep the ball amongst the forwards and use their power to just completely batter these guys. I don't know, maybe Southland have some big forwards and all the rest of it, but I just don't see it happening. And from what I'm told, it's not one of the New Zealand's strongest schools. So I think Porus will take that. So at the end of day 2, I think South Africa is going to take that 6 points to 4 overall. And again, as you can see, it's a lot tighter than it was last year at least. In terms of day 3, the South African Invitation team against the World Schools 15. The fact that they're making the South African Invitation team play against the Zambezi Steelers, shows that it's not going to be a strong team as I was hoping for. I mean, I showed you, as I indicated in a previous video, I was hoping for quite a strong Invitation team, but I don't think that'll be the case. I think the World Schools 15 will probably be a bit stronger. I anticipate them taking that. Sachs, I think, will take out the Steelers. Again, Zimbabwean players are just, it's just not that great, guys. I don't want to be insulting. I mean, they've given us a lot of South African internationals, the Zimbabweans, but this club is not going to really stand a chance against South African schools, even though Sachs aren't going to be that strong next year. And then Glenwood are going to be playing against Africa Pacific Dragons. I think the Africa Pacific Dragons will probably take this one, and the reason why I say that is because from what I understand, they're going to have a hell of a lot of talented players in this team, and I think the first match they'll try and find their feet, and I think they'll probably gel far more while as a unit in the second match, and I think it'll just be too much for the boys from Durban. Then Paul Jim will be playing Hartbury. I think Hartbury will take out Paul Jim from reasons I've stated before, and then Monument against John McGlashan. Once again, not one of New Zealand's powerhouses, so I think Monument will probably end up beating John McGlashan quite comfortably. So day 3, I think the rest of the world will win the majority of the game, so I see that being 4 points to 6 to the rest of the world. And then the day 4 fixtures, Boland Landbou are going to be playing the USA Schools. Again, guys, just an international team playing against a school, and Boland Landbou is a very, very small school. I mean, they pack a punch for the size, you know what I mean? But it's a national team against a small school, and I think the national team will probably end up taking it. Hilton against Italian All-Stars. I think Hilton will end up taking that. I mean, I'm basing on what I saw last year with Italian All-Stars. I think they'll probably take a similar team. From what I understand, it's not going to be their national under-18 team, as they're going to be playing in a tournament. I stand corrected, but that's what I'm being told. So I think Hilton will probably edge that one. Grey against Southland. I think Grey will take it very comfortably. Uffies against Christchurch. Yeah, so I've called an upset here. And my instinct tells me Uffies should just have too much in their, in the arsenal for Christchurch boys. But look, I don't see a Kiwi side, the stature of Christchurch boys coming over and losing 4 games on the trot. I think something has to give eventually, and I think this will be the game that gives. So I think they might just upset the apple cart, so to speak, and I think they might just take out Uffies. So I'm going to give it to Christchurch boys for that game. Then Paul Roos against Napier boys. I think that'll be a comfortable one for Paul Roos. Again, they're just going to have too much quality in the forwards, I think, for these guys. And obviously Napier going to have had played Portland Lundbo, grudge match. They're going to be giving it a lot. And I don't know if they'll have enough fuel in their tank for the last game against Porus. I mean, that's going to be a hell of a team to play for the last match. So, day 4 fixtures, I predict South Africa 6 and the rest of the world 4 points. And my predicted totals overall, I think South Africa will edge at 21-19. And to be honest with you guys, this is just a thumbsuck, and this is essentially what I hope happens. Because what I really want to happen is, for us just to have a festival rugby where all the games are relatively close, and we can sort of see a high standard of rugby being played, and rugby wins at the end of the day, because no one likes to see a school of the stature of Christchurch boys come over, or Napier or Hartbury, and get 50, 60 points put on the board against them. I mean, it doesn't do anyone any good. And also, a good thing they've done this year is get rid of those American schools. Who the fuck needs St. Ignatius, because they American Northwest or whatever the hell it is champions, to come over? That means jack shit. You know what I mean? To be an American champion in, rugby, like a district champion in rugby in America, is sort of like being a baseball champion in the Eastern Cape and going to go play the top American baseball schools. It's just not going to end well, in any code. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping is going to happen. But in terms of the format, from what I understand initially, what they agreed upon was that it was going to stay at Pole Boys for the first couple of years and then move around. So look, they've broken precedent essentially. So in terms of a new format, sort of what I'm thinking to spread the game around is that essentially travel costs are high, but I think the tournament has a lot more potential than just how it stands now and how they probably plan to do it for the next couple of years. South African sides will continue having home ground advantage, and that doesn't really balance the playing field. I think the tournament has the potential to displace the Sanex Festival very easily, and I think we need to start thinking globally in terms of this festival. So my sort of proposal would be to look at making the tournament revolve around 3-year cycles. So cycle 1 would be South Africa versus the rest of the world. Cycle 2 would be Asia Pacific versus the rest of the world, and the hosting would alternate between Australia and New Zealand. And then cycle 3 would be Europe versus the rest of the world, and that would you could alternate it between Ireland, England, Wales, and Scotland to host the tournament. What it basically means is that schools from the rest of the world could alternate, and travel costs could be saved in the long term. It'll be a bit rough to have Christchurch boys expected to pay to come to South Africa every year. It would be nice for us to sort of go over to New Zealand or go over to Australia and play these schools in their own backyard. You can't say like you're the best in the world when you're bringing over schools from New Zealand all the way to South Africa to play games away in extreme heat and conditions they're not used to. Our boys have to go over there and play in their conditions, and I think it'll just raise the profile of the tournament quite significantly. So here's an example of cycle 1 in Africa. You can see I've got the usual South African suspects over there. I've added some Eastern Cape and border schools in there, just to add a bit of balance, so it's more, more spread out through South Africa. And then obviously just have the Zimbabwe schools and Namibia schools, part of the Africa contingent. And then, like I say, you could have the USA schools, and they could play Namibia schools, for example, or Zimbabwe schools. And you could have, we need to get these top New Zealand schools in, like St. Kitts and Auckland Grammar, for example, Hamilton boys. That's when we really separate the men from the boys, so to speak. Also, I'd love to see some Aussie schools, another English school, and obviously the Irish schools. Would love to see them come over and play some of our top schools. That would be great. So this is just an example format for you. So, you'd have this tournament, and then, South Africa would either win the trophy or the rest of the world would win the trophy. So, the format is it is now, but it would be a cycle. So this would be the first cycle. Then we move on to the second cycle, which would be an Asia Pacific cycle. And you can see, you'd basically have your New Zealand schools, you'd have your Aussie schools, and then maybe what you could do at the bottom here, you could have Japan, Fiji, and Tonga playing against Namibia, the USA, and Italy. And you'd have your South African schools, your English schools, your Irish schools, and then New Zealand and Australian schools would be on the same team for this one to play against the rest of the world. So I just think that'd be quite interesting. And then obviously the final cycle would be Europe. And you can see, just add a few more English schools in there, add some more Irish schools, a Scottish school, a Welsh school, and then all of a sudden the South African and New Zealand and Australian teams, for example, are all playing on the same side. So essentially what you have happening is, you could be in opposition one year, but then you could be on the same sort of team in the Ryder Format Cup the next year. So I just think that creates bonds and, sort of builds things. And that's what the whole thing of this festival is supposed to be. I mean, at the end of the day, the slogan for this is in the spirit of rugby. And I think if we sort of spread it around a bit in 3-year cycles, like I mentioned, then every 3 years, South Africa knows that it's South Africa's turn to defend the trophy. Then it's the Asia Pacific turns to defend the trophy next year, and on it goes. And I think it would just freshen things up a bit. I think it would help with travel costs, and I think we could see a hell of a lot of strength versus strength in terms of the rugby. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Obviously, I'm hell of excited about this tournament. I mean, this tournament is essentially what started this channel off, and got quite a few views from some of the videos. And once I saw those views, I thought, hey, why don't I start doing some podcasts? And yeah, we are. So I've got a special attachment to this tournament, so I'm quite excited for it. Let me know what you guys think about how the tournament's going to pan out. And my Kiwi followers, please, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the New Zealand schools that are coming. I'm more than willing to change my predictions if you guys can convince me. But from the mates that I've spoken to, I wouldn't say they know a lot more than my community does. I mean, there's a lot of Kiwis, that follow this channel that sometimes email me in my inbox that give me a hell of a lot of great information as well. So I'm really looking to you guys to sort of give me information on these New Zealand schools and what sort of potential they have, and how do you guys see the tournament panning out? And in terms of the South Africans, what do you guys think is going to happen? Are you hoping for it to be closer? Do you want it to be a thrashing so we can sort of brag about how great our school rugby is and politics are ruining our international rugby? Yeah, just let me know what you guys think, and have a great week further. Cheers, bye.